We're learning Sicha Beis in Pashas Devarim in Chelek Yites on page 9. The Rabbi in this Sicha is going to discuss the whole union of Mishnah Torah, a fundamental Sicha regarding the entire Chumash of Devarim, which in Chazal is referred to as Mishnah Torah. What's the meaning of this? What's the difference between the other four Sfarim of Chamisha Chumshe Torah and Mishnah Torah, and the significance of it, as we'll see. In Pasik, Vayihi bar Boim Shana Goyme, Diber Moshe al Bnei Yisrael Goyme. The 40th year, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to all the Yidden. Zene Faran, zwei Pirushim von zwei Pashtonim. There are two different interpretations what exactly Moshe Rabbeinu spoke about from two of the Mefarshim that explain simple pshat in the Pasik. Was dann gewähnt die Rede von Moshe zu Yidden? What exactly did Moshe Rabbeinu speak to the Yidden? Aleph, one Pirish is, Rashi bringt that up from Sefri. Rashi quotes what it says in the Sefri. Das dann gewähnt, Divrei Techeche, Shalahichichon el Samach Lemisa. That this was Moshe Rabbeinu rebuking the Yidden before he passes away. As we see here, a lot of different things that he said to the Yidden about the past, of what happened, the Avedis that happened, and how you have to be careful for the future. Beis, another pshat, der Sefur nezogt, hechse lehem kol ha-Torah kula ad heina b'chlal. Moshe Rabbeinu reviewed with them all of the mitzvahs of the Torah, everything that he had taught them in the past, and he reviewed with them everything that he has said until here. As we also see in Chumash Devarim, that it goes over a lot of different mitzvahs that it already said before. And that's actually why it's referred to as Mishnah Torah. It's a repetition of the things, of the halachas of the Torah that it says before. Die zwei Perushim sind nicht bestire eine zum anderen. These two interpretations are not different or contradicting one another. Weil hava hayis nube. If you look in Chumash Devarim, you'll see that it contains both. In Sefer Devarim sind da divrei techeche. In Sefer Devarim you find words of Moshe Rabbeinu giving the Yidden Musa, rebuking them for things that happened. Und es werden im Ibegechazet kol ha-Torah kula, and it also reviews all of Torah, wie das es mudgish euch in sein Namen, Mishnah Torah, as it's seen in its name. Und in Afgemene zwischen die zwei Mefarshim, the only difference between these two interpretations is, was is mer bad gosha? What is it more emphasized? What do we highlight more when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Yidden? What was his main focus? To rebuke them or to review the mitzvahs? Oder nachme, was is mer ikke? What's more important? What's the primary focus? What's more important over here in the name Mishnah Torah, or when it says Diber Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Yidden? However, the question here is, wie bald das Diber Moshe geht auf den ganzen Sefer Devarim? When it says Diber Moshe, it's not referring to one or another section of what Moshe Rabbeinu spoke. It's referring to the entire Sefer Devarim. Darf man sagen, als jede von die beide Sachen, so we must say that the two different parts of Sefer Devarim that are included in Diber Moshe, which is the Divrei Techache, those parts that Moshe Rabbeinu rebuke Yidden, and Mishnah Torah, and the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu reviews the mitzvahs, is kolol zemizeh. They're included from one another. They're both included in the same word of Diber Moshe, so therefore they're included in one another. Oder, as yehab mateichen mishutif, or they have some kind of content that is connecting them, and therefore it's included both in the same words of Diber Moshe. So the question is, what is this? What is the connection between these two? It seems to be two unrelated things that happened here. Before Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, so he sort of goes through the history of the past and gives them his parting words, and he rebukes them and guides them for the future. It's one point. Then a different point, that Moshe Rabbeinu reviews the mitzvahs of the Torah, that they should know and remember the mitzvahs. What's the connection here? Der Chilok zwischen die erste vier Sfarim und Sefer Devarim. The difference that we find that there is between the first four Sfarim of Chamisha Chumshe Torah and Sefer Devarim, sagt the Gemara Megillah says as follows. As the vier Sfarim zenen mi pi HaGvura. The first four Sfarim are from the mouth of Hashem. Und Mishnah Torah hat Moshe gesagt mi pi atzmai. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying on his own, from his own mouth, from his own. This is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking and saying things that are recorded here in Mishnah Torah. That's the simple translation of the words of the Gemara. So the Rebbe immediately clarifies Der Pshat von Mipi Atzmai, but however, when the Gemara says that Mishnah Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking on his own, is nicht as Mishnah Torah had Moshe Chas v'Shalom gesagt von sich allein seine eigene Rede. It doesn't, God forbid, mean that Moshe Rabbeinu here in Mishnah Torah is speaking on his own words that are being recorded here. That can't be. The Rebbe quotes here in Order 7 that the Rambam says that anybody says that even one word in the entire Torah is something that Moshe Rabbeinu said on his own is a kaifer b'Torah. And that includes even the things that are in Mishnah Torah and Chumash Devarim. Nor, vi Rashi is this masber m'makam acher. Rather, as Rashi explains this elsewhere, Moshe lav me'elav v'yeshayna le Mishnah Torah chula. Moshe Rabbeinu did not teach them on his own the ideas and the things that are said in Mishnah Torah. Ella kamisha kiblahu, exactly the way he received it from the Eibishter, that's what he was repeating. And he was repeating and giving over to the Yidden what he heard from the Eibishter. And Rashi there is actually primarily focusing on the Luchas Shnias and what it says in the second Dibres in Parshas Vaschanan. And Rashi says everything that's written there in the second Luchas, Hayakasav Beluchais, it was already written in the first Luchas as well. And whatever he says here in Parshas Vaschanan, Moshe Rabbeinu heard B'Sinai. So what do we see here? That what's written in Mishnah Torah is not something that Moshe Rabbeinu on his own said with his mipi atzmai. Everything he said, he received and heard from the Eibishter. Und wie Teisve sagt, adasas Moshe me'atzmai amram, when it says in the Gemara that Moshe said it on his own, is given beruach HaKodesh. It's not that he said it on his own, from his own mind. He said it repeating things that he heard beruach HaKodesh. So now, if so, the question is, isn't it to move on? Wie bald, als ich Mishnah Torah hat Moshe gesagt, nicht seine Wörter, since over here even Mishnah Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu is not saying his own words, his own ideas, nor hat es gesagt Beruach HaKodesh. He's saying what he heard Beruach HaKodesh, Shchine medaberes mitech kroinai, the Shchine speaks through his throat, was the far, and therefore, hat gesagt, v'nasati mitagayme. You see this in the second parasha of Shema, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, v'nasati, and I will give rain, which refers to the Eibishter. And the reason Moshe Rabbeinu could speak this way about himself, that I give the rain, is because it's the Eibishter speaking through his mouth. So even here, it's not Moshe Rabbeinu's own words. So then why is Mishnah Torah any different than the other four Sfarim? And Chazal referred to it as Mipi Atzmai, but it's not Mipi Atzmai. It's l'chayra, seemingly the same direct communication that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving from what he heard from the Eibishter, Ruach HaKodesh. The selbe Shaila is euch dem, was the Gemara sagt. We could ask a similar question on this that the Gemara says in a few places. As afilu lamanda loydarish smuchim ba'alma. So there's usually in the Gemara, when you have two psukim that are one right near the other, so you can compare one to another and learn out halachas from one to another. But there's one opinion in Gemara that says that no, we can't learn from one another. When you have two psukim that are near one another, you can't compare them and they're separate. Besides one exception, b'Mishnah Torah darish. In Chumash Devarim and Mishnah Torah over here, even this opinion agrees that you could darshan from two psukim that are written near each other. What's the reason for this distinction? And the Ravon is masber. The Ravon, one of the Rishonim, explains. The reason is mishum dechol ha-Torah mipi ha-gvura nemra. All ha-Torah is the words of the Eibishter that are being recorded. Ve'ein muktem u'mocher. And we know that in Torah there's no order in what's before and what's after. It's the Eibishter speaking, and the psukim that are written one near each other is not necessarily with a certain seder. So you can't compare and learn one from another. Aval Moshe shesid Mishnah Torah, but Moshe Rabbeinu, when he organized the psukim of Mishnah Torah, parsha acha parsha, one parsha after the other, leisider ela lehidarish. It's Moshe Rabbeinu is on his own that organized this, and he organized the psukim in this way in order to actually compare them, to darshan and to compare one to another. So here you could darshan and compare. So move on. So here we have the same question. Wie bald as Mishnah Torah at Moshe gesagt, Ruach HaKodesh. So Mishnah Torah was also said with Ruach HaKodesh. Favas is the seder in Devarim, Tali and Moshe. So if it's all Ruach HaKodesh, so then everything over here about this, everything that was said, the order, the way it's said, and the way it's recorded, is also all Ruach HaKodesh. So why is that dependent on Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu organized this? Mashenkin in the Ashta Fir Svarim, as opposed to the first four Svarim, there we say that it's only the Shechina and the Mipi HaGvura. Was dann euch übergegeben geworden zu Jeden durch Moshe Rabbeinu. Even there, it's Moshe Rabbeinu that communicated and recorded the words that he heard from the Shekhinah. So if you're going to say the very fact that it's coming through Moshe, so therefore it's organized in a certain way, that should apply to the first 4 Sfarim as well. If it doesn't apply there, so it shouldn't apply here by the Chumash of Mishnah Torah, which also Moshe Rabbeinu is hearing from the Eibishter, Ruach HaKodesh. The beard in them. So the explanation here is as follows. So here the Rebbe will give a general important fundamental introduction regarding Torah in general. Chazal sagen alpaim shana kodma Torah leilam. The Torah precedes the world 2,000 years. Was kodma meint nit nur in zman. Kodma does not mean in time. That Torah is 2,000 years before the world is created. Actually, before the world is created, there is no time. Nor be'ikir in mailach shivis. Primarily what it refers to is in the level and the significance of the source of where Torah comes from. Torah mitzad atzma is in ganzen hecher from Welt. Torah on its own is completely removed and higher from the limits of the existence of the world. Und der Rebbe and therefore kedei Torah is allowed up coming in Welt in order for Torah to descend into the world. The Torah comes from its source. The Ruchni is the place totally removed of the reality of this world, and it comes down and applied and related to the physical being of the world, and it talks about the physical things in this world. So the Torah is coming from a very high place. It has to leave its place and come down and be applied here and into this world. There's through an intermediary that is drawing down and bringing Torah from one reality to this reality of the world. Was hatten sich beide inyanim. A mamutza, the concept of a mamutza is a connector, one that could connect from one reality, from the source of Torah, to bring the purity of what Torah is and bring it down undiluted here in this world to apply it physically in this new reality here. Is heche from Welt, und is in Welt. You have to have this power to connect, and this in memutza, this connecting force has to be on one hand someone that's on the level of Torah itself. In other words, it could relate to the source of Torah, but at the same time it could communicate and bring down the Torah and adapt it here into this world, into this physical world. And the fact and therefore this memutza can join these two opposite worlds and bring it together. So who is this memutza? The memutza zwischen Torah and Welt is Moshe Rabbeinu. That intermediary that draws Torah from its source and applies it and brings it down here into this world is Moshe Rabbeinu. Was bei ihm gefindt man zwei Ktzavis. You find regarding who Moshe Rabbeinu himself is that he is comprised of two opposites. Is given betachlis abittel nit mitzias v'nachnuma. On one hand, Moshe Rabbeinu does not relate to the reality of this world at all. He's totally above this world. He's absolute bottle to Hashem. V'nachnuma, he said about himself. What are we? A bittel was his heche from Welt. A level of bittel that's not based on any existence in the world, but a bittel that elevates and is totally removed from the existence in this world. That's on one hand. From the zweite Seite, on the other hand, is the gewen shleimus ametzias. Moshe Rabbeinu is described as the perfect human being, the most perfect of what exists in the world. The mitzias is mitzad Welt. Was the far is gewen balkaime. You see this also expressed by the physical stature and the height of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was Esther Amas, he was 10 Amas tall, which is the shleimus of the height of a human being, the number 10. Was is asach mer wie the shir kaima ragol von a ben adam gimel amas, which is much taller than the usual height that the Gemara says of every human being, which is 3 amas, about 4.5, about 5 feet, not including the head actually. So upon him, you see that Moshe Rabbeinu, how do we express his greatness? Not only by saying how bottle he was, but actually by speaking also about how tall he was, and how perfect and how great he was within the entity of this world. So that was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu combined the two opposites of being on one hand completely bottle and not a part of this world. He was, as it says in other places, the Rebbe quotes it here in Order 19, Mechetzia l'mayla elikim. One part of him was totally divine. On the other hand, Mechetzia l'mata ish, he was also a physical human being and the shleimus of a physical human being in this world. Und der Fahr hat gekent mechabe sein Teire, was es heche von Welt mit Welt. So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu brings down the Torah from its source and its purity that's totally removed of the entire existence of this world and draws it down to be applied and relevant here in this world below. So this is the general point of what is accomplished through Torah. The Eibishter gives us Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu here in this world. So now, when you have a mamutza, an intermediary that's drawing from a source and relating it over, communicating it to a new reality, that's the position of a mamutza, as it was here with Moshe Rabbeinu. But generally speaking, regarding a mamutza, so this could happen in one of two ways. Aleph b'derech maiver. One is when it's just sort of passing through. It's not coming into this new entity, into this new reality and adapting here, but it's just in a passive way being present. Die Ashpa wird nicht vereinzigt mit dem Memutze and an Eifen von es Slapsches in him. The Ashpa that's being drawn down through this intermediary into the new place is not being adapted by this Memutze in his mind with his own understanding, and then he's sort of interpreting it in his own way in order to bring it down, to lower it down, to be able to apply it to someone else that it's in a lower place. No, that's not what's happening. Ubemele is der Memutze nit poil ken shinui in der Ashpa. This intermediary is not really bringing any actual change in the Ashpa that he's drawing down. The very same Ashpa that there is in the source, the intermediary brings it and draws it and is communicating the same idea, the way it exists in the source, bringing it down into a lower place. Der Reiftu von dem Memutze is nur das, was tragt darab der Ashpa, wie sie ist, von a Hecherer in a Nidrike Madrege. The Memutze in this case is bringing and drawing the concept as is in one world, and bringing it down to a different world, into a different reality. But it remains with the same mahos, it's the same concept, the same idea that is being brought from one world and being explained into a lower world, but not adapted, not applied and not adapted, not changed in any way, but just being brought down into a lower, from a ruchnisdige world into a gashmisdige world. The mashal that Rabbi gives in the Order 25 is like when you take a dvar seichel, you have a concept in your mind, and then you bring it down on pen and paper. So it goes from being in a spiritual place in your mind, in your thoughts, and now it comes down in your hands on pen and paper. So now it's here with letters and words that are expressed and articulated on a paper. So it sort of went from one world of ruchnias to a world of gashmias. But nothing really changed. It's the same concept that passes through your hands. Your hands don't adapt and change the concept. It just brings it down into the world of ink and paper. That's one concept of a memutze that comes down, but it's b'derech maver. It's the memutze is doing something which is passive. He doesn't adapt and change the concept. Beis. But then there's another approach of a memutze. B'derech is slapshus. When you have a memutze that actually changes and adapts the concept. The Ashpa wird nicht slabisch und vereinzigt mit dem memutze. The idea that's being drawn down from the source is coming down and is being adapted and defined by the memutze. Was durch den wird a Shinui in der Ashpa. This brings a change in this Ashpa. Sie wird lefierech und bedarges am memutze. It comes down on the level of the memutze that's communicating this. Und durch dem können danach die Mekablem nehmen die Ashpa euchen sehr klea sage. And that's how this memutze is able to relate the idea to someone that's on a much lower level, because the memutze is able to find the right words to explain it and to lower it down, to bring it to their level that they should be able to understand it. So this is a memutze that's not just serving in a passive role to bring something from a higher place to a lower place and drawing it here without changing the essence of it. No, this is a memutze that serves a role of taking the idea and changing it, bringing it into his world, understanding it in his own ways, with his own words, adapting it in a way that he could be able to then explain it to someone else that's on a much lower level. Das ist der Chiluk zwischen die erste vier Svarim und Mishnah Torah. These through the two different ways of how a memutze functions is the difference between what Moshe Rabbeinu related in the other four of the Svarim of Chumash and Mishnah Torah. In the erste vier Svarim is Moshe given a memutze b'derech maiver. In the other four Svarim, Moshe Rabbeinu served as an intermediary to bring down Torah, but he did not adapt it at all. He did not change anything. He didn't lower it down. It's just serving in a passive role to bring it from a ruchnisdige world and to link it and bring it down into a gashmisdige world. Oder in a lashon from Rashi, nasa shliach. He's simply like a shliach. A shliach is not supposed to deviate at all from what the Meshaleach tells him to do. A shliach is not supposed to add his own two senses, his own ideas, and to adapt anything in his way. A shliach is simply a messenger bringing from the world of the Meshaleach directly, undiluted, to the world, to the place where he has to bring it to. These words of Torah weren't at all comprehended and changed by his own understanding. In a neifim von his slapshus, where it gets involved and enclosed and changed by his understanding, nor is geblieben in the darge von Mipi Hagvura. It remains the words of Hagvura, of the Eibishter, with its full intensity. It remains in the same essence even when it comes down. Dagegen, on the other hand, Mishnah Torah, when it comes to Chumash Devarim Mishnah Torah, Chach, euch das ist gesagt geworden beruach HaKodesh. This is also said with Moshe Rabbeinu hearing from the Eibishter beruach HaKodesh, hat sich aber der Ruach Havaya angetan und ist nicht was geworden in Asagas Moshe bederech Slapshus. But here the Ruach HaKodesh is a Ruach Havaya, but that Ruach Havaya enters into Moshe Rabbeinu's brain, and there's a tfisa, he comprehends it on his level, in his world, in his words, and from there he lowers it down and adapts it to be able to communicate it to the Yidden here below. It's for this reason that it's referred to as mipi atzmai, because here he's adapting it on a level that it could then be received and comprehended by the Yidden that'll teach it to them. So it's totally different. It's very different than what happens in the first four Sfarim that Moshe Rabbeinu brings directly to the Yidden. This explains also Favos, even the opinion that says that usually we do not darshan two psukim that are near each other is b'mishnah Torah darish, but in Mishnah Torah we do. The Yeresh Tefir Sfarim, so when it comes to the first four Sfarim of Chumash, since it did not get enclosed in Moshe Rabbeinu's mind, his seichel did not affect, did not comprehend, didn't enter into his mind, and he didn't adapt it. Is agam as der seder aksuvim is betachlas adiuk. So even though the order of psukim is precise, everything is precise in Torah, is this aber a hecher seder? It's a different kind of order, not an order that we could relate to. The smuchim is an nitloit that asage from the Devarim. The way the psukim are written one near each other are not anything that we could comprehend and darshan and explain. And the far is loy darish smuchim. So therefore he says we don't darshan smuchim. The order that's written is not something for our comprehension, and therefore it's not intended to be darshaned. Mashenken in Mishnah Torah was the Devarim hat sich mislabish gewesen in Asagas Moshe. Whereas here in Mishnah Torah, where the words of the Eibishter are also Ruach HaKodesh, but that Ruach HaKodesh then is adapted by Moshe Rabbeinu understanding. Is euch the Seder Advarim Vaksuvim, so therefore even the order of the words and the psukim here, Eisgestalt Leit Hasagas Moshe and Devarim, it's organized according to the way Moshe Rabbeinu understands this. Ubemele Darish Smuchen over here, this is intended to be Darshan, the psukim, the way they're written. That's the difference between Mishnah Torah and the other four Svarim. So now what comes out from all of this? It would seem that the four Svarim are on a much higher level. It's Moshe Rabbeinu communicating directly the words of the Eibishter, bringing it from the source directly to the world below without in any way tampering, not really tampering, but in other words, without adapting it on a level for himself to be able to apply it then to people that are on a lower level. It's more direct. In Mishnah Torah, there's a Yerida here. Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing it down and adapting it in his seichel, applying it to people that are lower that could understand it and appreciate it. So the Rebbe says, "Medaf aber verstehen, lama savaya kacha." Why does the Eibishter do this? What's the necessity of having Mishnah Torah? As Mishnah Torah will sein beslapshus in the Asaga from Moshe, that here the fifth of the Chamisha Chumshe Torah, Mishnah Torah, should come down from Ruach HaKodesh and be understood in Moshe Rabbeinu's own mind, and therefore we even say we relate it to Moshe Rabbeinu as if it's his. There's nothing that's accomplished by this. All that happens here is there's a Yerida. You're bringing Torah down a level. So what's the purpose of this? So here the Rebbe will explain that there's actually a tremendous Maila in Mishnah Torah that is much greater than the other four Svarim. Is the beard in them? So the explanation here is as follows. When you have ashpa that's being carried over through a mamutza, through an intermediary, from a source to the receiver on the other end, but it does not get affected in any way by the memutza. He's just carrying it over as is. It really, in essence, always remains removed and above the comprehension of the worlds of the Mekablim. As far them is he b'muhusa nitn zeya geder, and the memutza is in nit mishana. Since this is a concept, this is a ashpa, this is a seichel, that is not at all within their realm of understanding, and the memutza is bringing it down into their world, but really it's not a concept that ever adapts and relates to them, that they could really comprehend, like in the mashal that the Rebbe said before, regarding the pen and paper, that is bringing down the world of seichel from the mind of the person into the ink and paper that it's on, that it's articulated in those words. You can't ever say that now the paper adapts and explains and understands and receives this concept. It remains a dvar seichel. It doesn't become something which is physical. But it passes through and it comes into the world of ink and paper, but it never really becomes physical in the sense that now it's received, it's changed, it becomes a physical concept. No, it remains a concept. So the same thing also over here when we're talking about any ashpa that's passing through and is being brought from one world to another, but it's not ever adapting to that world, so it remains always removed from this new place. Und der Rinne von der Ashpa, was die Mekablim nehmen, so this new Ashpa that the Mekablim are taking, und was wird es atzem Zeira sage, is es nicht in dem Erech von der Ashpa atzma. This that they could take from this Ashpa, that they actually do comprehend, is not the Ashpa itself. The Ashpa itself always remains completely removed, because the Ashpa itself is unchanged. It never was lowered down and never was adapted to their level. Und der Rebbe, so therefore applying it back to Teire. Wenn Teire wollte herabgekommen lamata blois bederech maiver durch Moshe. If Teire would have came down to the world only as a memutza, where Moshe Rabbeinu is communicating it directly, unchanged. Wollten Yidden mit Zeire Kliyasage, so then Yidden, using their own minds and trying to comprehend Teire with their comprehension, nit gekent masig sein dem etzem Teire. The essence of Teire, of what it really is, that's something that was never brought down, that was never adapted to their level. Nemen dem dvar havaya, and to really take and receive the words of the Eibishter, that's something that remains unchanged and could never penetrate into their seichel. It remains above their comprehension. Das was sehr seichel wollte je masse gewen, the aspect of Teire that we could comprehend, what gewen a ha'ore v'chulu from dvar havaya. That's just some radiance, a much lower level of the source of what the Dvar Havaya itself is. So therefore, in other words, by bringing it down through a memutza in this way, which is bederech maiver, when it's just passing through, but it's never really adapting, you're missing the component of really, truly, fully bringing down Teire itself, that it should be understood by the Yidden here in this world. Und das ist der Reiftu für Mishnah Teire. So therefore, this is the additional accomplishment of Mishnah Teire. It's not merely a Yerida, but there's a tremendous accomplishment here. As durch dem, was Moshe hechzer lehem kol Teire kula. Moshe Rabbeinu reviews it for Yidden. Here the point, the emphasis is on the lehem. He's bringing it down to them. Wie es ist neslapisch geworden in sein Kli Asage mi piatzmai. Here Moshe Rabbeinu brings and teaches Yidden the Teire as he adapts it in his own mind. And now he communicates it to Yidden. Is there noch? So then, what is accomplished here is when a Yid lernt Teire, in welche matzav soll sein. So now a Yid, anytime he learns Teire, in any condition he may be, afilu when is nit Teire, even if he's impure, nemt di Teire. He's connecting to Teire itself. Moshe Rabbeinu, which is mechetzia l'mayla lekim, and can take the essence of Teire, took the essence of Teire, and comprehended and adapted that essence of Teire in his own words, in his own mind, in a way that then that could be related over to the receiver, to the Yidden. So it's taking the Teire itself, the Dvar Havaya, and making it available and accessible to the Yidden to comprehend. So therefore, so over here, the Teire doesn't remain aloof from the Yidden, totally removed from them, and the Yidden are comprehending just a ha'ara, a radiance of the Teire, but it's the Teire itself that's being adapted for Yidden to be able to comprehend in their seichel. Another detail here is, since the Hechselem, Moshe Rabbeinu reviews all the Teire, What Moshe Rabbeinu is accomplishing is not only unique to Mishnah Torah, but now this also changes the Yidden's access to learning the other Sfarim of Torah, that the Yidden are learning it and are able to comprehend the Torah itself, the Dvar Havaya of the Torah. Varam Moshe is der Memutze, was is Mechaber alle Yidden mit dem Eibischen. The reason why Moshe Rabbeinu is able to accomplish this for any Yid in any condition to learn Torah is because Moshe Rabbeinu is the intermediary that connects every single Yid with the Eibishter. Even those Yidden that are found in a very low place. Kiyudua and the minion from Ma'ayin Libasa. It's explained regarding when Yidden were requesting to eat basa when they were in the midbar. Moshe Rabbeinu said, how do I have basa to give them? Where do I come to such a level to feed them basa? As Moshe hat sich nicht gekannt mashpel sein in der Ashpa from B'sar Taiva. Moshe Rabbeinu could not lower himself down to a level of basa, not only basa, but basa that was a Taiva. Bis der Eibishter hat ihm gesagt, Isfalei shivim ish mezikni Yisrael, v'atzalti min haruach asher alecha, that you should gather 70 elders, and then I will take the light from that's on you and bring it upon them. So the emphasis here is the v'atzalti min haruach, or from the spirit, that is asher alecha, as they all come from the spirit of Moshe Rabbeinu, which means oich di hashpa hat gemust sein durch atzilus ruche shel Moshe. Even though the 70 Zekanim are being used there, but the Ashpa has to come from the Ruach of Moshe. Well, Allah Ashpas to Yidden kommen durch Moshe Dafka. All Ashpas, including the lowest level, even dealing with such Yidden that are on the level of B'sar Taiva, has to come through Moshe Rabbeinu. Und der Fahr, durch dem, was Torah hat sich angetan in der Memutze von Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, through the fact that Torah comes down into the existence of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is that intermediary, in alle seine Eser Ames, and Moshe Rabbeinu not only as being a Isha Lekim, but Moshe Rabbeinu as being the most perfect human being in his stature and his height of 10 Ames. Euch in dem niederigste Ame, including in the lowest Ame of the body of Moshe. Kommt dann die Teire zu alle Yidden afillet zu Apasha shebepshutim. So Moshe Rabbeinu carries over and brings the Teire down even to the lowest and the simplest of Yidden, that no matter who the Yid is, he's taking the source of Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu adapted and brought down for him to learn and comprehend in his seichel. That's the true accomplishment of the Memutza. In other words, not the Memutza only on the first level, where things are passing through B'derech Maiver, and it's not getting changed and affected, and it's never being adapted to the receiver. So there, it always remains aloof from the person, but the Torah is being brought down and adapted to the person to learn, but it's really the essence of Torah that's there. It remains the Dvar Havaya, but that Dvar Havaya is being brought down and adapted to the person to receive. Sort of a combination of two opposites. So the Rebbe now will address this. Wie können fort sein beide Hofchen zusammen? So how is this possible to have two opposites together? As Teire was wird nislabish in Seichel HaNivra. On one hand you have Teire that comes into the mind of a person that he thinks and understands it. Biz as nikras al shmai. So much so the Gemara says a person learns Teire and understands the words of Torah in his mind, the Torah is related to him. It's called Torah Sai. It's his Torah. Und kann Meichel sein al Kveidoi, welches mitzad Torah, and Allah is a Rav Shemachal al Kveidoi, Kveidoi Machal. A person that learns Torah because the Torah becomes his, so his honor that his students have to give him is the honor of Torah, and he and Torah become one identity, and he has the right, he has sort of the control and the right to be Meichel in the honor of Torah. It's his. So Babisho Zayin Dvar Havaya. But at the same time, it's the Eibishter's words. In other words, the accomplishment of the Memutza is not that the Memutza leaves behind the purity and the Dvar Havaya of the Torah and he adapts something different. He adapts it in his own world of something that's new and removed of the source, and that's what he brings down to the receiver. That's not the accomplishment of a Memutza. So then he's going away from the source. The Memutza is a connector. The Memutza is connecting the Dvar Havaya that exists in the source with its purity, and he's adapting that in a different world to be able to be explained in the world of the Makabel, not taking away the source of the essence of what it is. So how could you have these two opposites at the same time? What is this koyach of this Memutza? So the Rebbe explains, this is the Far. Over here, regarding Mishnah Torah, the explanation is, was Mishnah Torah nemtzach von atzmusi yisbarach. The way the Mishnah Torah is communicated to Moshe Rabbeinu is really the power of the very essence of the Eibishter. Was is hecher von his chalkos. That's above any levels, any divisions. Oiris, any revelations, any levels of light. Afili the oiris achi el yainim, The highest level of any revelation or expression of Hashem is defined in a certain level, even if it's extremely high and intense and unlimited, but it's defined in its world and its level. The moment you want to bring it out and communicate it to a different level, to another world of expression or another mode of godliness, it's not the same. It gets changed, it gets diluted, it doesn't retain the purity that it has in the previous level. These are different levels. Und der Fall ist, oder sie werden es gale mit der ganzen Teikif. So when you're talking about any level of revelation, so either it's that level there, where it's fully revealed with its full intensity, oib sie kommen nicht in slapshus, and that's in a case where this level is revealed and it's not adapting to anything else. It's here in its full intensity. Oder es werden sie ashine viride. If it leaves its place, if there's a certain gilui that's coming out and being communicated in a different world, so it loses its source, it loses its intensity. It goes into a different level, different mode. If it comes down and it's enclosed and communicated into a world of creation. So that's when you're talking about Eiris Vigiluyim. Eiris Vigiluyim, so everything is divided in various different levels. But when it comes to the very essence of the Eibishter, where there are no levels, there are no divisions, so here you could have both of them as one. Here you can have the two opposites together. The ashpa kumtarop is slapshus in nivra. On one hand, the ashpa reaches and extends all the way down to the lowest level into the creation. Biz as mezaktev them mipi atzmai. So much so that we were relating it to Moshe himself. It's he's speaking. The asaga von nivra, it's the comprehension of a person that's speaking. Ba b'shah is this b'mehusa dvaravaya. And at the very same time, in essence, what is this? It's the Eibishter's words. It's not a level of expression. It's not a level of revelation. It's the very essence of the Eibishter, the very essence of Torah. The very essence of Torah, wherever it is, remains the very same essence. It doesn't matter which world it's adapted into, which world it comes down into. It doesn't matter on the level that it's in. The very essence is it. This is it, no matter what level it's on. That is really the accomplishment of this Memutze here that we're speaking about in this context. So in other words, not only is Mishnah Torah not a Yerida, in contrast to the previous Sfarim, that it came down a level. Moshe Rabbeinu adapted it in his own words, in his own mind. Adarabah. Moshe Rabbeinu adapts it, but retains the purity of the source. And the only way that that's possible to have these two opposites together is because it's the essence of the Eibishter. That isn't on any level or isn't related to any revelation. It's the essence of the Torah, the essence of the Eibishter that comes from the source and is adapted to a lower world, and it's all one and the same. It could retain the source in the purity of the source, even when it's adapted on a lower level. So this is the difference between the first four Sfarim and Mishnah Torah. The Erste vier Sfarim and Mipia Gvura. The first four Sfarim are described as Mipia Gvura, that it comes from the Eibishter. Und noch mehr, wie der Ramban schreibt, the Ramban says regarding Torah in general, if you look in the way the psukim of the Torah are written, who's writing the psukim of the Torah? So the Ramban discusses this. The Mashal, it says in the pasuk, Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer. So who's writing this? Is the Eibishter writing this? If the Eibishter is writing it, it should have said, Vidibarti el Moshe, I spoke to Moshe. Is Moshe Rabbeinu writing this? It should have said, Vidiber Hashem Elai, Hashem spoke to me. Why does it say, Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer? There's like a third party that's writing what it says in Torah. So the Ramban says, as the Ramban schreibt, as eine geschrieben geworden wie a Shlishi am Medaber. When you read the psukim of Torah, it's like a third party that's speaking, und erzählt, as Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, that Hashem spoke to Moshe. That's what the Ramban says. That's the style of the writing of the Torah. So what does this mean? Who is this Shlishi Medaber? Taich Chassidus interprets what this means as das is Atzmus HaMeitzel, was is Hecha from Shem Havaya. This refers to the essence of the Eibishter, higher than the level of Havaya. Und der Fahr is Bekeiche zum Mechabes an Havaya mit Moshe. And therefore the Shlishi Medaber refers to Atzmus HaMeitzel, which is speaking about the communication that there is between Havaya, a certain level of revelation of a name of Havaya, that speaks and communicates to Moshe. That's all of Torah. So not only in Chumash Devarim and Mishnah Torah, but this is even regarding all of Torah, that it refers to Atzmus HaMeitzel. But here the Rebbe made the point before that it's Dafka Mishnah Torah that comes from the very essence of the Eibishter to communicate it in the world of the Yidden and still retain the purity of the source. So the Rebbe not clarifies. Von deswegen, but yet there's a difference. Das Kufa was wird angerufen Shlishi Ametabe, the very fact that in the rest of Torah we refer to the one that's writing the Torah, so to speak, the source of Torah, coming from the level of Shlishi Ametabe. There's a third party that's communicating this. Was is Mechaber, die Zwei, Havaya mit Moshe, and this level of Shlishi is a third level. And this third is bringing together these two. It's bringing together the name Havaya, communicating to Moshe. So this itself shows that we're speaking about a level, that there are levels here, there are divisions. There's a Shlishi Medaber, and then there's Moshe, there's Havaya, and we're bringing together the two. That's a very tremendous accomplishment, but yet it's still two entities that are coming together. But the point that we're saying here is deeper. As von Atzmusi is barach. This is from the very essence of the Eibishter. Was is hecher afile von Shlishi Medaber. That's even higher than this level of Shlishi Medaber that Chassidus usually speaks about regarding all the Torah. Und der Fahr kennen und seinen da beide Ktsavis, and therefore you have over here the two opposite extremes. On one hand, mipi atzmei from Moshe. On one hand, this is Moshe Rabbeinu himself, his entity. Und zusammen damit, Dvar Havaya, and at the very same time, this itself is Dvar Havaya. Over here in Mishnah Torah, it's not two levels that are being joined together. When you join together two levels, it's still two distinct levels. Elamai, we're bringing them together. And you have a higher force that brings together these two levels. So there's a higher revelation, a higher intensity that's able to bring two together. Over here we're talking about the very essence of the Eibishter. This is it. Moshe Rabbeinu, his essence is the Torah at the very essence of the Torah. This is it itself. It's not bringing two things together. And therefore when Moshe Rabbeinu communicates in his seichel the words of Torah to the Yidden, this is the very essence of the Torah itself that is communicating to the Yidden. That's a much greater accomplishment over here in this memutza of Torah more than the other four svarim. So now the Rebbe will relate this back to the point we said before, that in Mishnah Torah you have not only Moshe Rabbeinu teaching Torah to the Yidden, but also the Musar, the Teichacha, the rebuking of the Yidden. So the Rebbe relates this back to Avedis Adam in the Aveda von Tshuva. The Aveda of Tshuva has this point here. The Tnuah von Tshuva kommt von dem Bal Tshuva allein. On one hand, Tshuva is something that comes from the person alone. Why? Warum wie bald das Fahren Chet is a gewinn abgerissen von der Lakus Rachmana Litzlan. Before, wie bald das Fahren Chet is a gewinn abgerissen von der Lakus Rachmana Litzlan. When a person sins, so what happens? The person becomes completely separated from the Eibishter. Kommt aus, als eines eures Tshuva is nit mitzad agili yermel maila. Or Bal Tshuva is not in a position where he's in a world of revelation, in a world of connection, and therefore that inspires him to come to serve the Eibishter and do Tshuva. That's not what happens by a Bal Tshuva. Tzuvelachad is nitkin keli. He's not receiving this. He doesn't have the ability to be sensitive to any revelation from above. Nor from zich allein. There's something deep inside of him. There's something in the place of the person, that where he is, that he makes the decision and the choice to do tshuva. That's one aspect of about tshuva. But on the other hand, there's a cardinal rule, as yedes oirus kommt durch eine sinnes kayach mul maila. Everything, anytime a person is awakened from within, that he himself comes to his senses and realizes, I better do tshuva, there has to be something from above that is awakening the person. So that's always true. Nothing a person does is ever from on his own, himself. It comes from above. So what does that mean over here? When it comes to a Bal Tshuva, is it something that's coming from within, that the person wakes up on his own? He's not you talk to him, you try to inspire him, you try to reveal in him. He's not open to all of this. He's shut off, he's cut off, he's in a world where he's not sensitive to any ruchnisdige words of inspiration. So it has to come from a very deep place from within himself, that he comes to his own senses. But on the other hand, that everything a person does has to come l'mayla. So how do we explain this? What does this mean? Is it Inyan? And then the point there is, as the kayach of tshuva is from helema atzmi dein seif. The power of tshuva is not from a level of a revelation, of any level of a ruchnisdige revelation that inspires a person, but it's from a very deep, hidden essence of the Eibishter that comes in a hidden way that's in the essence of the person. Was wird nimshach in aneifen nelam, it's in the person in a concealed way. Azay is the tnuah von tshuva is ki'ilu von the Baal Tshuva mitzad atzma, and therefore the Baal Tshuva, he's doing tshuva. He feels this is me. What happens to the Baal Tshuva? He's not inspired, he's not connected, he does not interested in anything, but all of a sudden he wakes up and says, wait a minute, who am I? This is who I am. I should reconnect to my source. So it comes from a very deep essence in his very identity. On one hand, there is no revelation or inspiration here. And it's all coming from him, from his own decision. But at the very same time, what is that decision of his? It's a koyach nelam. It's that hidden essence of the Eibishter that's in him. Very similar to what we're explaining regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, that it's mipi atzmai. It's Moshe Rabbeinu's own comprehension in his seichel, but yet that essence of Moshe Rabbeinu understanding, what is it? It's really the essence of the Eibishter, the Dvar Havaya that's there. Und das ist der Kesher zwischen die zwei Perushim wegen der Teichel von Sefer Devarim. So this explains to us the connection of the two different components of Chumash Devarim, which it speaks about when it says Diber Moshe. So it says there's two different things: Divrei Techacha, rebuking the Yidden, and then Beis Hechselem Kol HaTeira Kula, teaching them all of Teira. Divrei Techacha is Tachlisam, the inyan von Tshuva. The Divrei Techacha Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Yidden. Is of course the point is to bring the Yidden to Tshuva. So this is the aspect of Tshuva that we're talking about here. And Avodas HaTshuva hat selben inyan wie Ilui Atzmi, was is da im Mishnah Torah Kanal. The Avodah of Tshuva has the very same unique power and the unique level that you have expressed in the whole inyan of Mishnah Torah. Just like Mishnah Torah is on one hand Moshe Rabbeinu himself, it's him, mipi atzmai, but yet because it's the essence of the Eibishter, this is the essence of Torah that's revealed here in the very being of Moshe. And same exact thing happens in Tshuva. On Tshuva, a person feels like this is me, this is my identity that's doing this Tshuva. But really, what is that identity? It's a koyach nelam, it's the essence of the Eibishter himself that's in him, that is his identity. We'll move on now. The Rebbe says it's understood. As geschehen, wie es hat gedarft sein, der Iluf im Mishnah Torah als Achone für die erste Knisse von Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Just as you had to have this Mishnah Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Yidden at the first time when Yidden were on the threshold here, entering into Eretz Yisrael. Al derech zeh is euch it's similar is also now. When we macht the Achonis to the Knisa Eretz Yisrael durch Mashiach Tzidkeinu. When we're making the very last preparations to enter into Eretz Yisrael through Mashiach. Und das is der Gilui von Teres Chassidus. And today, this is the revelation of Chassidus, ubefrat Teres Chassidus Chabad. Specifically, Chassidus Chabad was hot the selbe Teichen Anal wie Mishnah Torah, that has the very same accomplishment of what we've explained there regarding Mishnah Torah. Why? In Chassidus Chabad werden erklärt in Yonim von Holocaust und Aneifen as Chabad von den Menschen sollen können verstehen. On one hand, the whole idea of Chassidus Chabad is explaining the concepts of Chassidus in a way that Chochmet Bina Das, the person with his mind, could understand and learn and comprehend the words of Chassidus. That's one aspect of Chassidus Chabad. Bezer Aneifen, as es soll werden, a Yichud Nifla, Lies La Chodim, Yichodem Mamish Mikol Tzadeh Pina, the wondrous unity that Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya Perikei, that takes place when a person understands Torah, that it's fully integrated and understood in his Seichel. But on the other hand, Vertes durch dem nit nishtana chas v'sholem, es bleibt elikus. At the same time, though, Chassidus Chabad is not about diluting and lowering down or adapting the words of Torah on a lower level, which is just fit for human consumption or human comprehension. It's taking the purity of Chassidus and the purity of Torah and bringing it into the world of Seichel. It remains pure and pure, godly, divine words. So therefore here in Chassidus Chabad, you have the same point, the combination of the two opposites that become actually one. Und der koyach duruf. And the power of how this is possible is mitzadem, was Teres HaChassidus, is der Gilui from B'chinas Echidische B'Teire. Teres HaChassidus, and specifically Chassidus Chabad, is the revelation of the very essence, the very Yechida of Teire, V'geret Amal Barichis, Etzem Pnimius HaTeire, it's the very essence, the innermost part of Teire. Und der Fahr wird nicht stane, euch wenn steht in a slapshus in Seichel Anushi. And therefore, even when it is adapted, sort of, and it is explained in human comprehension in the person's mind, and a person could learn it and feel like, oh, I understand this is mine. At the same time, though, it's the essence of the Eibishter that's there in these words of Teire that you're understanding. That's the accomplishment of Chassidus Chabad. It's godly, but at the same time, it's in your human comprehension. Das ist the Sheiches zwischen Teres HaChassidus and Yefutzim Mayanesecha Chutza. This is the connection of Chassidus, the revelation of Chassidus, and the expression that the Baal Shem Tov heard from Mashiach in his dream, that Chassidus is the wellsprings of Teire, as der Mayan Alein, the very wellspring itself, darf herabkommen in Chutza. It's not only that there's water that flows from the wellspring outward, but the very wellspring itself comes outward. Weil wer kann öftan in der Chutza, who is the one that could come and bring down the very Teire itself into the Chutza, and it should remain with the purity of Teire, is es dafke bekayach from the Mayan Alein. When you go back to the very source of the wellspring, that could be brought down here below and be applied into the Chutza, but yet retain its purity of the source of what it is. And the far is das die Achone zu Kosimar, and therefore this is the preparation for the arrival of Mashiach. Weil dann wird nisgale werden, der v'yeda kolpol kiata palte. Then when Mashiach comes, it'll be revealed that every created being will know its creator that has formed him, that has made him. As oich der chutza sheba chutza, even the lowest of the lowest aspect that's outside here in the world. Der pa'ol alein, the very existence, he himself, from his own approach, wie is bechitzayne yusay. Mizet nit sein verbund mit dem kayach hapoil. You're looking at who he is independently, and you see him as an entity for itself. Is miyuchad mit dem Eibishter, he himself will become totally unified with the Eibishter himself. The far was ato, atzmusi is barach, the expression that it says here, ato, and ato, in the Chassidus it says, refers to the Eibishter himself, pa'alta. It's the Eibishter himself that's the true source of this independent yesh, this independent being that's here. What's the true existence of this yesh? It's the true yesh of the Eibishter himself that is his being. And that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes, and therefore this is accomplished through the revelation of Chassidus Chabad.